Welcome to the Consulting Leaders Podcast, where we talk about the business of consulting. Whether you're looking to grow your practice or learn from the stories of leaders in consulting, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Guillaume Jouvencel, ex-PwC and co-founder of GHA Marketing. Join me as I interview the best consultants in their niche. Let's get on with the show. Mark, welcome to Consulting Leaders. Let's just jump straight into it. What got you into consulting, Mark?
Guillaume, thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
It is a pleasure. So tell me, what pushed you from, product roles into value-centric selling and eventually consulting? What's the journey?
Well, my first big boy job, your first job out of college is like an American pancake in the pan. It never turns around, you throw that one away. But the first job after that was at a company called W.L. Gore, who was maniacal about value, customer perceived value. And I was a product manager there. And at that company, it's a true product manager role. So I did, the product strategy, the sales, the marketing, everything. And so I regularly went out and sold. And it was kind of nice because the salespeople would find an application that was probably a good fit for my product. And my way of selling then was simply making sure that what the customer was trying to accomplish, my solution was the best way to do that and design an optimal solution for them. It was a semi-custom wire and cable product. And so that way of selling was kind of how I was introduced to it. And that maniacal focus on value, I just kind of thought that's just the way business runs. I thought all companies are this focused on value. Then when I got to my next job, which was at Lucent Technologies, which is the old Bell Labs monopoly, I found out that it wasn't remotely true. And as many times at Gore as we would ask, geez, what's our value here at Lucent? My first day, 3 times during my, the first day there, it's meeting, getting to know who's who in the zoo. My third meeting just before lunch was like each meeting, somebody had asked the question, what's the process for? So what's our value got replaced with what's the process? What's the value is outward customer outcome focused. What's the process is super inwardly focused. And what a gift to have my career, my fate throw such a stark contrast at me from one job to the next. And then, over the course of many jobs and many years, I continued to take that value focus, and it made me a very high contributor in lots of companies. So I've always, since that first job, sold value. I've always realized just how important value is. Many years later, I became a consultant for the world's largest B2B sales training company, Miller Heiman. And so it was kind of a nice circle because at that first company, Gore, we had just hired Miller Heiman when I was there. But the company did really well with that training because the company culture was so deeply founded and anchored in customer value that when you put the Miller Heiman on top of it, it just made sense and it became really easy. When I was a consultant for Miller Heiman and the client companies didn't have that anchoring and value focus, it just became really hard, or they couldn't make it work, or it just became a list exercise or a compliance exercise. And so I had to leave Miller Heiman in order to get people to practice Miller Heiman more effectively. So because I had to be able to get people to change the culture, to found the culture on value, which was, Miller Heiman wanted you to do the sales training. So I had to leave Miller Heiman to make customers successful with Miller Heiman.
Oh, what would you say is the biggest problem that you solve now and for whom? Like today's Mark Boundy, what problem do you solve for whom?
That's really interesting. And I'm going to tell you a little bit of a bigger story, right?
Yes, I love stories.
When I was helping a big client, Fortune 150 company, the person who hired me was actually also a former consultant with Miller Heiman. He hired me saying, Mark, my salespeople are good at the Miller Heiman, but we aren't selling value well enough and they're discounting too much. So they hired me to kind of zhuzh up the Miller Heiman so that they wouldn't discount so much. And we started doing really well. And this ex-colleague was the head of commercial excellence, which is kind of sales support, all those affiliated departments kind of rolled up under him as a single function to make sales most effective. And we said, all right, we're selling value now, which means selling the customer an outcome. But, now that we've sold the outcome, the rest of the company has to deliver the outcome we sold. He goes, absolutely. You're absolutely right, Mark. But that making the value, delivering the value, that's a different vice president. And that vice president and I don't get along. So you don't even want an introduction from me. And you've worked with enough big companies, that's, I see you smiling, but not
do that then.
But not a surprised smile. Because that's just kind of very normal for big companies. And so I told myself, that was kind of another light bulb moment that said, I have to enter the company. So before that, I would enter in the sales silo, vice president of sales, in this case, the commercial excellence, something like that, to help them sell value. And in order to really have a successful engagement, I had to enter above that at the CEO, the CFO, the board, if the company was small enough. So I had to kind of reposition my practice kind of late in the game to be one where I entered at the executive, above the sales silo. Turns out that in some ways it's easier. Because the vice president of sales has calling on him, trying to sell him. There are 10,000 companies that make software packages that automate sales and or marketing. Over 10,000. There are dozens of sales training companies. So it is an extremely noisy space. And even if they had none, sales management is a very difficult, time-consuming job because especially if a frontline sales manager, you're torn between coaching salespeople. Most sales managers have 0 minutes per week to do that because you're always chasing deals, fixing deals, updating forecasts. In the average company, it's a 4-week cycle where the first week of the month, the forecast isn't in CRM because nobody trusts CRM. So here's the spreadsheet. Put your forecast in the spreadsheet. Second week is you're going to do some selling, but I want you to update the spreadsheet because last week you found out some of the deals that you thought were going to close this month aren't. And I want you to put enough deals back in so that the totals what I gave to the vice president. So the second week, put some deals in that last week you didn't think were forecastable, but you need them in there now. Third week, you sell. Fourth week is close anything that moves, including obscene discounts. And then week 1, you start all over with flogging everybody for the results of last month. And it's a 4-month cycle. That environment is really hard to try to sell consulting services in.
It's the famous close anything with a pulse and a credit card. Oh, by the way, pulse is optional.
Yeah.
Just credit card.
Yeah.
So back to you then, Mark. How do you help those teams? How do you help those people?
Well, it has to be about getting to the CEO and saying we have to stop the madness. I know how important month end is, and I know how important quarter end is. But if you keep on giving your people the feeling or incentivizing them to discount at the end of the month, a host of bad things happen. Your customers wait until the last week of the month because they know you're going to offer a discount. Or they, and if they don't have the budget closed up, available at the end of the month, they'll call you in the first week of the month and saying, you offered that last week. That price is still good, isn't it? So pretty soon, those temporary discounts quickly become permanent discounts. You have no credibility in your market. You have no credibility with your customers when you quote prices. And every dollar that you discount is actually a profit dollar that you gave up because your cost of fulfillment did not change 1 penny. So that dollar you gave to a customer is a profit dollar, not a sales dollar. It's a profit dollar. And there can be good reasons to give your customers profit dollars, but not as many reasons as most sales teams think of.
Yeah, but Mark, this will get me at the top of the leaderboard because I will have a higher close rate.
When I was at GE Capital, I was in the top 4% of my 150-person sales force nationwide in revenue produced and in profitability of deals, because we were paid on deal profitability, which is something I propose that every sales team pay your salespeople, have a significant component of their comp plan based on deal profitability. So I was one of 2 people who are in the top 5% on both of those lists. The guy who was on the top of the revenue list was near the bottom of the pack on deal profitability because he was a price whore.
Saying the terms. I love it.
Are we live? Is that okay to say live?
That is totally okay. It's
too late now.
We do whatever the F we want. So I like how, first of all, straight shooting and also being honest and transparent about what sales consulting really is and what sales really is. At the end of the day, you need to understand sales in order to consult on it. So in your particular case, who do you help? And I'm gonna dig a little bit deeper for this specific one. Who makes the decision? Because especially in sales, you have so many different stakeholders, not necessarily decision makers, but people who have a stake in this, right? Like obviously the VP of sales wants to hit quota, wants to reassure shareholders, reassure the board, like, hey, look, we are doing great. We are hitting the numbers that we said we were going to hit. The CEOs need to think about profitability, but also, he's accountable to the board. The sales guys, they're like, I just want to close as many good deals as possible because what matters to me is my comp. So who do you help and who makes the decision of hiring you?
Yeah, it's a very holistic, who do I help is a very holistic thing. I help people all around the company, and we can talk about the different aspects of what that means in different corners of the company. So who hires me is going to be the CEO. The chief sales officer, oftentimes I will help them reduce the pressure of every month end. I will actually, by getting them to be, it turns out that maybe 25% of CFOs in the B2B market, chief sales officers, actually have any component of their comp plan based on profitability. So 75% of chief sales officers are paid to not care about how profitable their company is. So if you are in executive row, in mahogany row, and one of the vice presidents is the one person who doesn't care about profitability, what kind of seat do they have at the table? What kind of respect do they have? And so I help sales leaders say, by caring about this, it's good for your career, not only to stay in as chief sales officer, but to get the respect you deserve around the rest of the company. Salespeople can become a lot more successful. I learned at Gore, and I didn't know that I learned this until I met so many average to mediocre salespeople, helping thousands of salespeople at Miller Heiman. Maybe 5 to 8% of people at Miller Heiman sold value the way that 100% of the salespeople at Gore regularly did it. And I actually talked to vice presidents of sales at big public companies, Fortune 50 companies, who were convinced of the 80-20 rule was even optimistic. They said, I expect that maybe 10% of my salespeople are going to produce 70 or 80% of my sales. And that is just a law of nature. I can't improve on that. And my experience at Gore was, you can, 100% of your people can sell like the top 5 to 8% of salespeople in the world. You just have to raise your expectations and change the culture and make it easy for them. Or make it hard for them to do anything else.
I like that as a sales guy.
At Gore, all right, I'm a brand new a brand new product manager. So I fly back to headquarters and I'm a puppy product manager sitting in the office with a highly experienced, high contributor that they wanted me to shadow for the day, product manager. His phone rang, and this is 35 years ago. So he picks up the phone and it's one of the sales guys. And he said, hey, so-and-so, I just was at such and such a company. They have an application for your product. And the product manager said, all right, tell me, what's our value? And the sales guy said, I don't know yet, but let me tell you about the application and where it's going. And the product manager said, what are you talking to me for? Don't call me back until you know the value. And he didn't say goodbye. He just hung up the phone. You know, this was back in the days when you could slam the phone down and it like felt really good. It said something.
Now you have softwares, you can't do that anymore. You can rage on a random object on your desk.
And so I learned very quickly, it's impermissible not to know the value. You got nothing done in that company if you didn't know the value. And the value, the answer to what's our value, that 3-word question is, who's the customer? What industry are they in? How do they compete and differentiate themselves in their industry? What are they trying to buy from us? How's that going to help them differentiate better? How many dollars does that get the customer? Well, how many dollars does the customer just estimate that the customer is going to get? Not how many did I tell the customer? How many did the customer tell me? How many dollars is the customer going to get from that? And how many of those dollars do we think that we can take as our price premium? If you didn't know that entire arc, nobody would lift a finger for you. If you did know that arc, people would do anything for you. And so the salespeople very quickly learned that I've got to be able to answer that question if I want anything done. And answering that question makes you sell like the top 5 to 8% of salespeople in the world. And it was
revenue and profitability.
Yeah.
So how do you market yourself, Mark? Because this is not just, hey, sell better. It's like you need to understand the value, you need to understand the culture, you need to understand who's involved and how to actually help the business grow, not just get your commission.
Yeah.
So how do you market, how do you brand yourself so that Fortune 50, 100, 150 companies come to you and be like, Mark, help us out?
I market myself by not marketing myself.
Genius strategy. Next question.
I know that the kinds of companies that dare to change their culture to do it the right way, this infinity effect way, are few and far between. And I need to make sure, obviously do some marketing to make sure people learn that I'm out there, but I can't make somebody want to change. I can't go to that Fortune 150 company that said, yeah, that's another vice president and you don't even want me to introduce you. That was never going to be a good client. I just didn't know it when they first hired me. So I am lucky enough that I only need half a dozen of clients a year max, but I need half a dozen of clients who really want it and want to make that change.
How do you get in front of those half a dozen clients per year?
You know, and networking, to do that, to have somebody trust me with their future like that takes a pretty fair amount of credibility. Yeah. And that kind of credibility doesn't come from social media posts and content. It comes from referrals, it comes from networking, it comes from people knowing you. So I don't have many giant client needs, high numbers of client needs, but I have just a network of happy clients who know what I do and kind of know who I should be talking to next.
Because I guess it's a pretty big deal for your clients specifically, right? We are talking about big deals, but also lengthy deals, right? It does a whole sales motion for Fortune 50 companies doesn't change in like a week. It's like multiple months, if not more, project, I assume, and training and like stakeholder management. So how do you, here is one for you. How do you sell those people? You get into their network by networking, you get referred to them, you go to whatever event that will put you in front of the right VPs, the right person. But then how do you take that conversation from just a conversation to SOW, letter of engagement, let's rock and roll? Like, how do you sell to Fortune 50 companies?
I sell the way I teach my clients to sell. And that is start with the outcome in mind. People don't buy your product or service. They don't buy my consulting service.
They couldn't care less.
They couldn't care. I often at networking, when people say, hi, I'm so-and-so, I do this, I say, hi, I'm Mark Boundy, and you don't care what I do. What you care about is what you're going to achieve if we were to ever do business together. Mm-hmm. And here's what that is. So start the conversation with what outcomes are you trying to accomplish? Why is that important? If you're not getting that, what is that costing you? How many dollars is that worth? What are the derivative or second order effects? And what do those cost? Who all should we be engaging to make sure that this looks? And so at that point, you start saying, what would happen if we had a program that made this change and this change? Who all should, so what you're doing then is co-creating an outcome. And so it's not a sale anymore. My good friend, Rob Hardnett, he's in Australia. He uses the expression, sell like you're already doing business together. Sell like you're already. What it means is that you're co-creating an outcome together. You're not selling them something that they should do. You found out what they want and you're helping them get what they want. I mean, to get somebody to buy anything from you, you either have to make yourself a new priority for them that's higher than all the other fires nipping at their heels, or you need to find out what the fires already nipping at their heels are and turn yourself into a way to put one of them out. That second one is much easier, much, much easier. So if I can turn myself into a way to solve your problems, then suddenly we're not buying and selling anymore, we're planning.
How long does that take you?
It has taken as little as a few days with people who already know what I do and have just moved to a new company, to months.
So I want to double down on a few things here because I think this is so valuable for consultants, namely because consultants by nature don't like to sell, and they get their first business project engagements without having to sell because it's purely referral. It's their former employer saying, hey, don't leave, or like if you leave, I hire you as a consultant, blah, blah, blah. But then once you start wanting to grow and scale, you need to sell. And I think there are a few nuggets like the ones that you just said that I want to double down.
Yeah.
Pressing on the pain points, not in a way of like saying, hey, look, you're bad there. It's just making them, they will believe themselves much more than they will believe you if you say something. So instead of saying, hey, you're not achieving this because X, Y, Z, it's like, hey, talk to me about this. How much does that cost you not to act on this? How much does that cost you per year, per month, not to solve that problem? Why is that, you think? Who else is involved in that? I see you validating here. Mark, do you want to add something to that?
No, you're absolutely right. And one interesting thing is very often when you're having that conversation, they kind of know they have that problem, especially when it's one of the second or third order effects. They kind of know, but they haven't thought about it. It hasn't become solid in their minds. Worked with a colleague who is selling a type of lab equipment that hospitals buy. So when you get the blood draw in the little tube, those blood samples go down to a machine in the basement, and the machine tests and gives you a big printout of 50 different things in your blood. Yep. And this company had, for a couple of the tests, they were more accurate on those tests than the competitors. And the doctors kind of like that, and the lab people kind of like that. But what we turned out to find out is that the misdiagnosis from that inaccurate actually caused dollars of claims. And so you add a new person to the buying committee who's the chief risk officer, and you ask them, how much do you spend on this risk every year? And if we were to reduce that by 20%, how many dollars, what is 20% of that? And would it be okay if I took 1/3 of that amount as my price premium? It turns out that 1/3 is 5 times your regular price premium. So I love this. When you ask a customer that question, what does this cost you? You force them to do their own internal exploration. They know that it's a big risk. They know that they spend a lot of money. And in the example I just gave, they actually had to go to the person who could actually find out how many dollars and cents that was. But when you force somebody to quantify or monetize that risk, the dollar value they will pay actually goes up simply from the ask of you causing the number to flash on the screen in their head. It's not what you told them, because value only exists in your customer's mind. So it's what they told themselves, and all you had to do was ask them to tell themselves.
Amen. So one of the things I learned when I was in consulting myself, actually, that's one of the partners over there that taught me this. He was like, Guillaume, there are 2 types of consultants. There are the hunters and the farmers. And he was like, I'm a hunter. I love the smell of fresh blood in the morning. I love to go after new business. That's my jam. The partners who move the fastest, the partners who bring in the most money home, are the farmers, though. The ones who are able to take that initial engagement, over-deliver on it, and then transform it into a multi-layered, multi-year project, feeding other teams at PwC. Those are the ones who bring in the most money. By the nature of what you do and your biz, Mark, I'm going to assume that you're more on the hunter side. How do you nurture, though? How do you farm? How do you take that initial engagement and be like, okay, look, guys, we've increased sales by 25%. We've reduced friction. We increased profitability, whatever the metric is. How do you get that recurring business with your consulting practice?
Well, what will happen is there is perhaps, the story I told was get the salespeople to stop discounting so much.
Yeah.
That was the entry point. There's multiple entry points, but when you start with that entry point and you say, geez, we really need to start delivering the value you sold, now that's how you go from that entry point and expand around the company. We're trying to create a holistic, value-oriented culture, and there's lots of places to start that. When you sell well, you find all the stakeholders involved in the purchase, and you find out what each stakeholder is trying to accomplish for their business, in their role, in their job, the KPIs that they're responsible for, and maybe what that means for them personally. The GDPR might prevent you from recording that, but you find out what that means to them. But sales teams, good sales teams, find all that out, and they struggle and they bleed to get all that information. And when they make the sale, all the sales team turns over to the implementation team is a statement of work, maybe a spec. They don't say, here are the key stakeholders involved, and here's what each stakeholder considers success. You got that information, you own it, you bled for it, you struggled to get it. And now the implementation team doesn't have it. All they have is a sterile statement of work. You've poisoned your chances of success by not giving the information that you already struggled to gather. That's free money and free customer loyalty if you would just manage that project to all the stakeholders' expectations. Because then renewal is a matter of going around to all those stakeholders and saying, hey, when you bought this, here's what you were trying to achieve. Here's what you hoped for. Here's what you got. Person B, here's what you hoped for. Here's what you got. C, here's what you hoped for. Here's what you got. Pretty good, huh? How about we renew for another year? Here's the new price.
I love this. Mark, you've got everything nailed pretty much to a T, which makes sense. You've been in the business for quite some time. You've nailed the marketing, you've nailed the sales, the retention. Tell me, where are you stuck right now?
I'm stuck trying to figure out how many clients that I do and don't want to take. I'm at the point in my career, right? I am lucky enough so that I don't need to take another client the rest of my life.
So you do this just for the love of the sport?
I do it for the love of the sport and for the love of the companies that reach out to me saying, Mark, I would love to be able to do what you help people do.
So what's next for you then? What's the next big thing that you're looking forward to? And I don't mean 24 to 36 months. Although that's interesting as well, but I'm like, next 3 to 6 months, what is it that you're looking forward? What's the next level for growth? If that's something you even want, right? Because it's not like,
one of the things that I did, I actually was approached by a small startup who couldn't afford to pay me any money, but paid me in equity. I can't afford to take all clients like that, but 1 or 2 is fine. And when I don't need cash in my life, that's a wonderful thing. And so they made me an advisor and then made me a part-time chief marketing and product officer. So with any luck, I will get a lot more busy than I really had hoped to be at this point in my life. So, something like that might happen.
Mark, ladies and gentlemen, Mark, if people want to find out more about you, say what you do, get you on board in exchange for equity if they're a startup, where should they go?
I am, you can look for my book on the Big A, Amazon. My new book is called The Infinity Effect. My old book is Radical Value. You can find me on LinkedIn, Mark Boundy. Boundy is with a D, almost like the paper towels, Boundy. I think the only other Mark Boundy on LinkedIn is a professional golfer in New Zealand. That's not me. It's an unusual enough name so that you can get a hold of me. So reach out to me on LinkedIn is probably one of the easiest ways.
Well, I can say one thing for sure, that is that out of this interview, you got at least 1 connection on LinkedIn. Mark, I just added you. We'll put all the links in the description. And Mark, thank you so much for coming on Consulting Leaders.
Guillaume, thank you so much. I really appreciate the time. I had a great conversation.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Leaders Podcast. We hope you learned valuable lessons on how to grow your practice and take your business to the next level. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening to this show so you never miss an episode. To apply and be a guest on the show, click the link in the description. See you next time.